Looking for real stories that lift you up and light a fire inside? Welcome to Inspire and Impact, the podcast where purpose meets perseverance. This is where transformation begins and your story continues.
Welcome to the Inspire and Impact podcast interviews. I'm your host, Daniel Rosenstein. Today I have the honor of interviewing Blair Dunkley. Blair, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you for having me.
Can you share with the audience a little bit about your background? Like, what is it like you do and that type of thing?
I help with how people think. There's been so much research or whatever done in neuroscience, and it's basically on how we think. And there's little out there in the market. It's about what we think, what we believe, what we think we should do, and all of that kind of stuff. And I found I've been doing this now for over 50 years. And the more that I've moved along in this process, the more neuroscience has started to catch up with the direction that I was going in and proving out exactly where I was and what my beliefs were. And my belief is that if we don't have a way of creating a mental framework, a mind model is what I created, was mind models, we can get lost in our own thoughts. And a lot of people will then suffer from depression, anxiety, fears, overwhelm, stuck in self-sabotage, all of those things and a lot more. And I go, okay, so how do we actually stop that? And that's what my research has been all about.
Wonderful. I mean, can you explain a little bit more about what exactly do the mind models do? Like, how do they help people?
Tonight on the Blair Dunkley experience, we're going through one of my favorites, and it's about one of the earlier mind models. It's effective versus ineffective. And the language that we use, we often judge ourselves, and most people beat the crap out of themselves internally. So they're very hard on themselves because they're doing things in the language pattern of good, bad, right, or wrong. And I don't know if you know this or not, but just the definition of good has over 40 meanings of good. Of bad has over 30 meanings of bad. So we're not being terribly specific in our brain because our brain's trying to sort through what this is. And when we're telling ourselves, this is good, this is bad, this is right, this is wrong, all of a sudden, all of that judgmental stuff is non-specific. It feels specific to us because we've habituated to it, but it isn't. And it doesn't give us the elements that we need to be able to identify how to move forward effectively. And when we just use the word effective versus ineffective, or the words, and by the way, I use most of my mind models use a process called compare and contrast. And what we wind up doing is we comparing one word to the other, like effective versus ineffective. And when we take a look at what's effective, the meaning of the word effective is much tighter. It is fewer definitional breakdowns of it. So it's far more specific, and we can change things when we're specific. We can't change when things are always general, which is another mind model, general versus specific. So we need to move towards being able to be specific. So effective versus ineffective also is another interesting thing. We don't generally attach, like this shirt. You know, if I wanted to change my behavior, I could, behavior is sort of like this shirt. I could go change my shirt, or I can go change my behavior. But at the end of the day, that's something that's very specific that I can do. But if I'm sitting back and judging, is this good? Is this bad? Is this the best that I can do? Is this not? There's all kinds of clouded decision-making that is now all over the place. and so many self-judgments that we place ourselves in and we become habituated to. And the way that we break that is through a process that is compare and contrast, but we need a process that gives us something specific, which is effective or ineffective. Or you can, if people don't like the words effective or ineffective, I tested out and found, does this work for you or not work for you, is the same thing. And the funny thing is, work or effective is externally verifiable. So people don't associate it with them as being right, them as being wrong, them as being good, them as being bad. Okay, so all of a sudden that shifting becomes externally verifiable, which is huge because it's something that you can actually evaluate. And in my language that I've just used here, I've given you actually literally the 3 E's. The first mind model is effective versus ineffective. Then it's external versus internal. Then it's evaluation versus judgment. And what we want to do is we want to get away from all this critical self-judgment that we put ourselves through.
Can you maybe explain how the mind model is different than traditional mindset coaching or training?
Okay, you lit the fuse. You had to go there. No, just kidding. But okay, I've been on a quest for over 50 years, basically 50 years. I started in 1976, so 49, but it was prior to that. Still, I realized that mindset is all about what to think. And it's not how to think, it's about what to think and do and what to believe. And it's okay, be effective. To be effective, what are you going to do? And I used the word effective. Yeah, but they pivoted into believe in yourself. And how many people have tried to believe in themselves when they're down and not doing what they're doing, and they just can't believe in themselves? I mean, I ran a school for 35 years. It was life skills colleges. We had 80% of our students, and we had over 1,000 students a year at our peak, and 80% of them were potentially suicidal. You can't tell people, just believe in yourself. That doesn't work. You've got to give them tangible, effective things to do that are externally verifiable so that when they test it, they can see a real world result as opposed to just hoping that they feel better. And so that's really a critical piece here. Mind models are thought frameworks and behaviors that are thoroughly tested. By the way, mindset is barely tested at all. And the tests that have been done has shown that mindset works approximately 1% of the time, at best, at building success and getting yourself going. Yet, on the other hand, it can hold you back up to a minus 12%. It can actually be not very good for you, okay, at the end of the day. However, mind models work because they're thought frameworks and behaviors that give you a way of how to think. You can test them in the real world. And the interesting thing here is if you test them 3 times in a row, if they didn't work the first time, because they're designed to work, actually not just designed, they were tested to work 80% of the time the first time. But the interesting thing with that high probability is if you actually have a situation where it didn't work and you evaluate effectively, it will simultaneously move you into, and you evaluate it and figure out another externally verifiable thing to test. And you do that 3 times in a row, you have a 99.9% probability that you will have broken through to your path of becoming resourceful.
Can you like walk us through like a specific example, like a real life example of how a mind model helps somebody like overcome like a particular challenge or mindset block?
Okay. I'm one of the people that I now work with on a daily basis. She came on and, she'll be on the Blair Dunkley experience tonight. We're going to co-host it together, and I'm training her as a trainer. When I first met her, she had over 10 years of depression. She wasn't, somebody that you would think would become a facilitator and a trainer of this, except that the effectiveness of the mind models started working in. And one of the things that I needed to do was to get her to do two things. The first one is to start evaluating herself with effective versus ineffective, and to see that her behaviors of depression could change. So if she actually thought differently, used a different mental framework, instead of going, why did I do that? Why am I beating myself up? I'm constantly there. I'm not a very good person. I'm like, why do I do this to myself? Why don't I just figure this out? Why can't I move forward? First of all, she's stuck in a why state. That's called the why loop. And with why loops generate reasons, excuses, rationalizations, and justifications, and are 100% in the past. You can't change your past. You can only change your present and going forward. So instead of, what I say is, if you're sort of backwards facing and looking back over your shoulder, how can you go forward effectively? You can't. You trip and fall every step. So turn it around, get yourself in the present, facing forward, and then let yourself make mistakes. One of the biggest problems with mindset is it promises that these are all going to work out for you, that all you got to do is just get the right mindset. That's it. And that doesn't work. When you are stuck in where you're stuck, especially with things like depression, you don't get out of it that easy, just with hope and desire. Like, there are so many people that would hope for things to be better, but it doesn't happen. Life happens to us, and we have to have strategies, thought frameworks, mind models to be able to move forward effectively.
You're absolutely right, because many years ago, I suffered from depression for many years. And it was very difficult to get out of it. I mean, when I did see a psychologist, he did exactly what you said. He said, oh, just snap out of it. And I go,
So, okay, how? Then you tell me how, and I'll do it over and over again. But, like this snap out of it thing, you don't snap out of it. You build behaviors that are different than where you currently are. I mean, that's the whole reason that I wrote my book, Ultimate Mind Hacking. It's 16 highly effective mind models, 16 highly effective ways to smash through 23 unhealthy mindsets. And so that book breaks it down of how you actually get a mind model, actually a stack of mind models. They don't work it's not one and done, because life isn't that simple. Like with the 3 E's, and I'll give you a link here so that your audience actually, if they go to like LinkedIn /IN Blair Dunkley 1 and find my place on LinkedIn. And then all they got to do is put in a code word, and that is going to be the number 3 and the capital letter E. And I will send them that entire it's a free ebook and an hour and 20-minute masterclass for free, so that they can literally start figuring out how do I apply this in my life. Where can I go? And the neat things about mind models is it's not just, oh, this is what you do for depression. This is what you do for self-doubt. No, mind models are ubiquitous. So effective versus ineffective. Where does that not fit in your life? So one of the key things here is just send me that and I'll give you my LinkedIn URL. And then you have your people do that and I'll send them a free gift on that, the 3 E's free gift. So that whole piece is always broken down into individual mind models that need to be worked, not necessarily in sequence either. They just need to be used and you experience the shift and you get to test it. What worked for you? What doesn't work for you? And you get to refine it. And that's the difference between mindset and mind model. Mindset is trying to give you a recipe that one size fits all. And our brains, like neuroscience tells us it's not a one size fits all brain. Your brain, although similar to mine, is not the same. Your experiences have wired your brain your way, making it unique to you. So trying to tell you, oh, I do it this way, it'll work for you too. No, it probably won't. There's almost a 90% probability that it won't work. And yet you feel now depressed because it's obviously working for Blair, but it's not working for me. How come? Because your brain's wired differently. You have a different set of resources that you can fall back on. I don't know what those resources are. Mindset assumes everybody is similar, if not the same. Mind models assume that we have common meanings and we understand the meanings of words. And that underlying meaning of words lets us figure out how to test the model, how to become resourceful, not how to have an answer, but how to become resourceful so you find your own answers because your life is unique.
That's definitely really true because I said, like, when I was depressed many years ago, I went to see a psychiatrist who gave me a medication and to try to change my brain's chemistry. And that particular medication didn't work for me because you said it was almost like a one size fits all. Like they assumed like they knew exactly the right pill that would change my brain's chemistry, not realizing that my brain is unique compared to some other people. But medication does work to other people. I'm not, downplaying.
Yeah, but the percentages are usually 50% or less that those medications work. So they keep on trying other medications, even if it's like a very good drug has a 60% efficacy for people. That's extremely high for medications, which means that 40% of the time it's not going to work. Which would you rather have? Something that works 80% of the time or something that works 60% of the time?
Not to mention, I mean, I'm sure your mind model doesn't have any side effects. So I did have side effects for my.
No kidding. None. Zero. See, it has a side effect. When you use it, your brain is now engaged in recognizing what is effective and what's ineffective, which means you're building a data bank of experiences, a range of experiences that oh, that didn't work this way, but I bet you over here it could work because your brain is going to connect to resources. But when you have a drug in your system, your brain is less likely to connect to other resources, not more likely. So there is a very positive spinoff, very positive side effect of mind models. What happens is people become more and more resourceful because it's a networking interaction between the mind models. Like I shared with you, the 3 E's. Those are 3 different mind models that took me about 4 years to recognize because I was using them all the time. And all of a sudden I go, oh, effective versus ineffective. external versus internal and evaluation versus judgment. I was thinking evaluation and judgment was a foundation that I started with, but I realized, no, what if I started with effective versus ineffective? People can see the difference almost instantaneously just by asking themselves that simple question. Is this working for me? How many times do people ask themselves that kind of question? I'm depressed. What do? They go into their, why am I depressed? I can't seem to get out of it. Why can't I get out of it? Where was is this effective for me or ineffective? But yet the lady that I was telling you, it took me 2 sessions and she started recognizing, and I said, just test this out. Don't believe in the mind model. I don't care whether or not you believe it'll work or don't work, that won't work for you. I don't care. Okay. Just use it and see, just test it out and we'll make that determination. She tested it out, took her 2 sessions, couple of weeks, and she started realizing when I asked myself the question, when I got depressed and I sort of heard you in my head and you said, just ask the question, is this effective? And I went, no, it's not effective. And then the follow-up question is, what might I do differently now? And that follow-up question, rather than going into, this doesn't work for me, why isn't it working? Oh, let's figure out, what might I do differently now? And she realized that if she got up and went for a walk, which I strongly recommend for people who are a little bit depressed, you like to stay sedentary, you don't want to move, you don't do anything. And what that does is that lets the brain stay in a stuck state. But if you force yourself to just get up and move, you've changed state. And she realized, you know what? I'm not going down that rabbit hole again. I'm not, going down the drain with all those negative thoughts. And she realized she had laundry to do, and she got up and she did laundry. She hadn't done laundry in her own home for 4 months prior to that. And she couldn't believe that she got up and just did a load of laundry. And then, the next week she comes back, she tells me that. And I said, so did you move the laundry from, the load from the washer to the dryer? She said, no, I didn't. But I asked my daughter if she would, and she did. But that was amazing for me to do that. I said, so what might you do next time? She said, I might just get up and move the wash up. Great. Good. What else might you see? All of a sudden, these activity things that were not present in her depressed state and things that she felt like it was impossible for her to do, all of a sudden became possible because she changed her state. She was out of her why state. Why can't I do this? Why don't I? Why am I? All of these why things, and pivoted into, what might I do differently now? And that was a game changer for her because she changed her language structure. When you change your language structure, you change your neurophysiological structure in your brain. You're literally using a different neural pathway. And when you change that neural pathway, you gain resourcefulness. That's it. Is it really tough? Yes, it is to do when you've got a habituated language pattern. Is it difficult to do? Yes, it is. Is it simple to do? Yes, it is. It's just not easy because you've trained your brain in a pathway that it's very comfortable in. Then I taught her about safety versus comfort because she thought that anything that was uncomfortable was unsafe. And that's just not true. In fact, we have to be uncomfortable to change. We has to be uncomfortable to change. Because literally, again, neuroscience has come back and taught us, shown us that the neuropeptides in our brains, neuropeptides are the molecules of emotion that float around in our brain. Okay, so we can look at those. And there's a really fascinating research on this. Sorry, geeking out here a bit. But the stuff here is the molecules of emotions. Some of these molecules can morph into up to 50 different shapes. And they can do it almost instantaneously. And when those morphs happen, you have a different emotional connection. You get excitement. And this can spread to every cell of your body in seconds, like 2 seconds or less. It's amazing how fast the transformation can happen in your body because it's just this whole cascade event that happens. So,
Well, in addition to the mind models, I mean, you're a very well-established person. I mean, the amount of research you've done is incredible. I mean, very few people in the psychology field that I've seen have done the amount of research and studies that you've done. So, I mean, because in addition to the mind models, you've also done a lot of research on behavioral profile systems. Can you maybe explain to our audience what exactly is that and how does that help people understand their profile?
basically what I do is I created a language-based profiling system. And that was all the fundamental research in the area of question concepts that I referred to. Question concepts are not the words who, where, who, what, where, when, why, and how. Those 6 words are the titles of the question concepts, but not the concepts themselves. Most people think that the words are the thing that are important, but that's not accurate. It's the process. There's 4 columns that I discovered that are all entwined with the meanings of those words and the way that those words operate. So if I'm going to just give you want to do a little bit of a thought experiment with me or a practical experiment? Okay, I'm going to yell it. Okay. Now, what I'd like to do is just you tell me which question concept I used, but not focus on the word, focus on the concept. And notice I haven't even taught you the concept yet. You don't need to know it because your brain already subconsciously generally knows it. And unless you're an engineering person or somebody trained in that genre with high degree of information focus, most people get it other than engineers. So what do you do that for? Right now, what did you do? Tell me, what are you doing that for? Which question concept did I use?
You're right. You're saying the why do you do this? You know,
Exactly. That's what I'm actually saying. But the word I used was what? And if you're not an engineer, engineers are about 50-50. Everybody else is about 98%. If I do that to everybody else other than engineer, people who have trained their brain to focus in on the detail of the content, other than that, you have 98% of the population going, that's why. He's wanting to know why I did it. Which means you will respond with a reason, excuse, rationalization, justification. And I don't know if you noticed this, but go back on the film on this and just watch your face. Your face sort of went like a little bit of color went out, a little shock and awe, because even though you knew I was going to be yelling at you, your brain and body reacted emotionally to the attack. Although verbal and thousands of miles apart, all of a sudden, boom, you're safe, but your brain didn't know that. Your brain felt attacked. And so you physiologically responded completely correctly with the why question concept because of how it was structured. That is a thought experiment. When I did that, and I knew I'm using a what word with a why structure of the question concept, that means the words are not the concepts. And when we understand that, what does that tell us if we actually listen for the structure of the language pattern that you use? Then I can hear beyond the words into your meta pattern of your structure. And if I take that meta pattern that you gave me, everybody's giving this to everybody else all the time. Can I plug that in my brain, use my mirror neurons? Everybody has mirror neurons, and we can mirror their reality. And then I can ask myself some fundamental questions. If everything that Daniel just said is 100% true and accurate, then if I follow that pattern, what else might be true and accurate for Daniel's pattern? And then I can plug in details. And then I can create high probability guesses, which is profiling, which is basically 80+% accurate. It's not perfect. I'm not psychic. I can't tell you exactly what's going on in your brain, but I just recognized your meta pattern of how you think. I plug that in my brain. Then I ask you, so what would you like me to tell you about your life? Using your meta pattern, I then tell people all about themselves. No, they're just best guesses, but they're pretty accurate.
So for my reaction stuff and my meta pattern, what can you tell about me? I'm just curious.
I know that two things that are, you have a lot of contradictory stuff that goes on in your life. You both wear your heart on your sleeve and you protect it like crazy, like simultaneously. So that's part of that meta pattern. So you don't want to you have to hold your cards close to your vest, and not give away too much, but you don't mind sharing them under the appropriate conditions. And sometimes people find you very open to sharing, and other times very closed down, which means it's that yin and yang, that opposite. And that's in your language pattern. Your language pattern also is a lot of care and concern for people, but a lot of desire to protect yourself at the same time, because you don't want to get sucked into somebody else's stuff too far, because you don't have a pattern that gives you the ability to modulate. So you have a tendency to flip switches rather than have a rheostat, like a dimmer on there. It tends to be off or on. So that tends to be a pattern more common to you. You can modulate sometimes, especially with people that you know and trust. But until you get that trust, it's off or on, and frequently starts off, and they have to earn the on position.
Wow, that's really accurate. That's really, you barely know me, but you do know me on a really deep level. I mean,
How long have we talked? Maybe 15, 20 minutes, whatever. And I've been doing most of the talking.
Yeah. Wow. So, what type of applications do you use this profiling for? I mean, business applications?
Oh, absolutely. I got paid very well as a business consultant, making 5 figures, 6 figures a day, sometimes definitely 6 figures a year for 12 days of my time, like just a day a month. And I'd be making 6 figures off that. But then I'd be guiding executives and showing them how to apply mind models to not only themselves, but their teams. So that would be able to be shifted. I've gone in and done corporate culture engineering by changing how people think, and again, done with mind models. I've worked with individuals that have not had, like Patty, my person I'm training up, 10 years. of ongoing depression, she was being medicated. She was going into talk therapy. She was seeing people on, and just going through that. I did 12 sessions with her over 4 months. And the first 2 months was weekly for 8 weeks. And then the next was 4 more sessions over the next 2 months to stretch it out, to give her the ability to adapt and adopt and apply and literally habituate some of these mind models. She came in eventually and took coach training, and she started becoming a coach, and a very good one. She could relate to people's issues who were having their own difficulties, and she specializes in trauma recovery. So people with trauma. And I had another couple of individuals that Becky and Tim Graff, they wrote a book, and it's called Swept Away. It's on Amazon. And Swept Away is the story of Becky and Tim, mostly Becky, who on Mother's Day, the year after they were trained as mind model method coaches, wound up going for Mother's Day into their favorite spot, which happened to be a slot canyon in Utah, I believe. And it was 5 years ago, basically now. And on that Mother's Day, unfortunately, there was a flash flood, and it caught the 3 of them in that slot canyon. And the 2 girls were 3 and 7, and they were swept away. And so was Becky. Becky barely survived. And unfortunately, the 2 daughters did not. And Tim found, the bodies of his 2 daughters. And, fortunately, Becky had been found, and he went back looking for the girls once his wife was sent off to the hospital. But that's a huge trauma. They didn't go in for PTSD, therapy, training, counseling, drug, nothing. They applied mind models to their marriage, to themselves, to the loss of their girls. And it doesn't evaporate the issues. Like for me, my motivator to build mind models in the first place was I was trained as a mindset facilitator back in the day. I was first trained as a life skills coach. And as I was developing that, I found some small gaps, I thought, in life skills, and that we needed to add depth, because life skills was not designed for the mental health focus that our school was focused on. But at the end of the day, mindset, I thought, was that thing they kept on saying, this will work. This is the best thing since sliced bread. Unfortunately, it didn't. And I had firsthand effect of that, because 4 years after I was trained as a facilitator and had been training people in mindset as well as life skills, I realized when my dad went into a coma that, he went into a coma, and 2 weeks after that coma, the doctor said, it is unlikely that he's ever going to get out. In fact, there's a 99% chance that he's never getting out of the coma. And my mindset was broken. I remember going downstairs after hearing that news, taking a shower and collapsing in the shower and just convulsively crying until the water was running really cold on me. And I crawled out, still crying, and pulled a towel down. And the next thing I recall was having a meeting about 2 weeks later with my mindset facilitator, our trainer. And she put me through the same 90-minute battery of exercises that she had taught me, that I had taught my students. And at the end of the day, I told her, this isn't working. And she looked at me and said, Blair, you just don't believe enough. And I went, this is horrible. You cannot tell me that. Oh, sorry. I got carried away. F you. Okay. But It's just was unconscionable what she did. It was not okay. Because if I said that at life skills colleges and my students heard me say, "It's because you don't believe enough," and 80% of them are potentially suicidal, somebody would die. You can't say that because that system is flawed. It's broken. It does not keep its promise to get you better. It's not getting you better. It's if you're already good, it can get you a little bit better. And I thought it was very good because I was in a very good spot up until the point where my mindset broke when my dad went into a coma. And I needed my mindset the most right then. And that was completely unconscionable of her. Anyway, I never talked to her again, but that's one of the pivotal things that caused me to dive into mind models and to figure this stuff out, because I'm not going to give people stuff when I can't even make it work for me now. So this isn't fair. This isn't correct. And I'd had heard from my students prior to that how some of them had gone through some kind of trauma and how trauma broke their mindset. Not okay. That's the cool thing about mindset. You don't need to, about mind models. So you don't need to believe in mind models for them to work. You just need to use them. That's it. It's the only requirement. Just use it and see what happens. Don't believe that it's going to change your life. You don't need to. Just use it and see what happens. And test it out. And that's what I teach people to do. Just test it out. And if it didn't work the first time, 3 more, and you're at 99.9% probable that you'll have a breakthrough. Not the answer, but that you'll move from stuck to resourceful. And that's the whole, everybody is looking for answers. And I go, yes, answers are important. Don't get me wrong. However, getting to the process of finding answers is far more valuable than having an answer. Because if you just have an answer, it's like giving you a fish. If you have a process to get to the answer, one of my clients said, it's not even like, Blair, everybody says it's like teaching people to fish. And the mind models are way different than that, because the mind models, when you start applying them, it's not like teaching you to fish. It's teaching you how to get resourceful so you can teach yourself how to fish. So it's so transferable to so many other life situations. It's not about fishing. It's about business. It's about life. It's about personal relationships. It's about your own personal mental health. It's about getting resourceful in every area of your life, whether that's, weight disorders, eating disorders, getting yourself fit, getting yourself focused, overcoming, fears, phobias. Like, we didn't even get into that area. I've got a brand new book out called Phobia Freedom Formula, and that should be out in the next week or two on Amazon. And the Phobia Freedom Formula is literally about the neuroscience, this long forgotten but very valid therapy called thought field therapy, and mind models, blending all 3 of those together to create the Phobia Freedom Formula. And that's a powerful combination to be able to help people get way more resources. And get people unstuck almost instantly. In 45 minutes or less, have people overcome their fears, phobias, and anxieties, including things like, when they have all this self-doubt and self-sabotage going on, you can overcome that in literally 45 minutes. Now, with self-doubt or self-sabotage, you'll probably need replacement behaviors as well. And those behaviors, if you use them as mind models, are extensively tested thought frameworks, skills, and behaviors. There's the word behavior again. And you apply that. And the cool thing here is neuroscience has literally proven. Don't bother about trying to believe in yourself. Behave. Change the behavior, and you will change your belief. Don't change the behavior, you won't necessarily change the belief. And if you do, your belief may not hold. Because if you've just psyched yourself into believing the belief, do you have the behavior that supports it? Does that give you more room to find the behavior? Some people say yes. If I go, it's arguably just as probable that you are going to find it anyway, because you're doing stuff. But if you actually look for it intentionally with the mind models, that's what they're designed to do, is give you that structure, that thought framework to look at skills, attitudes, behaviors that you can shift in that moment and figure out, is this effective? Is this ineffective? Is it externally verifiable? If it is, if you could record it, or if somebody else could witness your behavior, then it's externally verifiable. And then you can evaluate it. And it doesn't have to be perfect. It's called failing fast, falling forward. That's one of the other mind models. Fail fast, falling forward. Because you can test it and you can evaluate mistakes. One of the things that I found fascinating was this whole research project done on people. And how many times do people actually allow themselves to make a mistake in order to change? How many opportunities do people give themselves? Do you have any idea?
1, 2, probably not that many.
You're actually bracketed the actual answer. It's 1.2 times. Literally 1.2 times before the vast majority of people will quit. They'll try it once, sometimes twice. But to get that number there, because there's other people that'll do it 3 or 4 times. And, the funny thing is that entrepreneurs, if you're an entrepreneur, you're probably going to be on the upper end of that scale and do it up to 10 times before you throw in the towel. You'll make mistakes a bunch of different times. And that's what makes you different, because you're prepared to get up and try again. Now, what makes you even more, and I was just talking with a dear friend of mine, Tyler, who's started out being this poor guy, not making a lot of money. And now he's a multi-millionaire doing these mega projects. And he's running them himself. I am partnering and building all the teams and everything. He also has companies he went from doing 40,000 a year personal revenue to 2 million in a year, because he changed how he was thinking. And it's not about the business model. It's not about everything else. It's about how you think it through. And if you can evaluate that business model more effectively and test it out, you can make refinements and get the results you're looking for. It applies to any area of your life, including he's now married with 2 kids. And I used to use the mind models with him when he was dating and have him evaluate his girlfriends, literally, and work it through. It's great in relationships.
So what would you say to somebody that may say, oh, I tried everything and nothing worked?
But he came to me. In fact, his brother referred him to me. And he said, you know what? You might have seen everything else, but you haven't seen the mind models and Blair Dunkley's work. And he actually bought his brother this book. And he went through and read this book and said, you're right, this is different. So what's different about it? It gives you practical models to apply to life situations, as opposed to telling you what to think and trying to give you fixes. These are practical models that you have to apply and make your own. These are places to how to think differently. And if you haven't gone through mind models, then you haven't done everything. So it's just that simple. You think you've done it all. Have you used mind models? You haven't done everything. So how come you're laughing? That was funny.
Because it seems I've met people who are think like that. It says, "Oh, I've tried, it doesn't work."
Yep.
I've tried psychology, it doesn't work. I've tried hypnosis, it doesn't work.
Yeah. Now, like I've met hundreds of those because the model is so tightly constrained. See, you and I are talking right now, right? Okay. How are we talking? Any idea? How are you understanding me?
I'm asking a question and you're giving me an answer and a story and explanation.
Sure. But what if we dove deeper into that? Because we're using words. And at the underpinning of every word your brain subconsciously chose, in fact, language is mostly a response behavior. You give me a response back to a question and an answer, response behaviors. But what if we broke it down into the meanings of the words? And that's what I wound up researching is what if we're not behaving to the story? What if we behave to the meanings of words? So choosing our words, could that change our behavior? All the time. Our parents tell us, no, don't do this, do something else. We understand the meanings. We change our behavior. I mean, we go to school. That's right, that's wrong, that's good, that's bad. We learn about judgment. We judge ourselves. And we go home and maybe our parents go, you know what, Blair, you did really well overall. Fine, you didn't get 100%. Your sister did, but you didn't. And that's okay because you did your best. And I go, yeah, I did my best. My best is different than my sister's best. But that's what I understood. And I behaved to the meanings of those words. So I built the mind models based on the meanings of words. And the funny thing is, the meanings of words are process-based in your brain. In other words, your brain instantly wires the meanings of those words in a process flow, which is we have contextual memory and we have process memory. Process memory sticks. Context memory, in other words, the story, that thing, although it's a nice story, we don't really pull without repetition, a lot of repetition, the context of that and turn that context into a process. But process memory, you already have. And what if I just built off that? And that's what I did. I made sticky behaviors and sticky mind models. So when people hear them, like when you understand, when I say effective versus ineffective, you know what's effective, correct? Do you feel like it's you that's being effective or the things that you do are effective or ineffective? Which is it?
The latter. It's the thing.
Yeah,
Right.
the things that you do. So now all of a sudden, I've got a judgment-free model. But if I asked you, are you doing things that are right here? Is the judgment you or is the judgment the thing? It's you.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, you're at risk. So if I shift it to effective, It's the thing that can be changed easily, as opposed, and psychologists, like you said before, you shared, you've had, your depression and talk therapy didn't work. How come? Because they probably asked you a whole bunch of whys. Like, why is this happening to you? Tell me. And you blurt, and you tell why your parents did what you did, what they did, what they said, go back into regression. And so you may actually figure that out. That's why it's where you are. So what can you do with that now moving forward? Absolutely nothing. Nothing is different, except you now understand your past. So what? I want people to be able to change in the present, because we all live in the present. So let's shift.
So what would you say are like, what advice you give to people in terms of if they want to shift to have a better life, or, what is the first step should somebody take to start rewiring their mind?
Literally join me on Tuesday nights on the Blair Dunkley Experience. Just type in Blair Dunkley Experience on YouTube, and that's free. So if you want to start seeing that, if you want something else, I've shown you the book, Ultimate Mind Hacking, which is there. It's on YouTube or on Amazon. And I have another one that's coming out in the next few weeks. So by the time this is up, it'll likely be out. And that's called, it'll be called Phobia Freedom Formula. So that will be a breakdown of how the Phobia Freedom Formula works. So it gives people who need to understand the process. And then again, like I said before, get a hold of me through LinkedIn and Blair Dunkley on LinkedIn. That's who I am. Or LinkedIn, www.linkedin.com/IN/Blair Dunkley 1. And, if you want the freebie, that gives you more in-depth on the 3 E's. And hey, I offer coach training. I offer counseling, but I'm expensive, moderately expensive. I'm not super high end, but moderately expensive. If you have a phobia, fear, or anxiety that you want to overcome, that's actually really inexpensive. It's in the hundreds of dollars range, and it's usually one session. And so I work with you to overcome your phobias, fears, and anxieties very quick, so you can transform your life like right now.
Well, I really enjoyed talking with you, but unfortunately, our conversation needs to come to an end because we're getting around the hour now. Is there any final thoughts you'd like to share with the audience before we wrap up our conversation for today?
Other than what I did, I will make sure that you have my LinkedIn link. I can also give them my book link if they're interested in finding out more information, and a link to the Blair Dunkley Experience, which is free. So absolutely 100% free. And I do that every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Mountain, 9 p.m. Eastern. And so I'll be doing that tonight, since this happens to be a Tuesday night.
Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing with us with your experience and your knowledge about mind models. I'm definitely going to be buying the book myself because it looks really interesting. I said, being that I had a lot of issues, troubles overcoming them, and I have overcome a lot of my issues, but I'm always looking for more personal growth.
Absolutely. And the cool thing about mind models are, the more you practice them and you just use them in your life, the more ubiquitous they become, and they just become how you think. They're not hard to do. They're easy, and they just get absorbed into habit patterns because it's just more effective than not.
Well, Blair, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate sharing all your knowledge and wisdom with our audience today.
Daniel, it's been an honor and a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. I super appreciate it.